In a year where we are acknowledging the centenary of World War I and the 70th anniversary of D-Day, the accounts of war heroes have a special resonance this particular year. Both Michael, Naya and his brother Pierre served in the Royal Army Medical Corps. Their careers ran parallel with one another. War Medic Hero is Michael's tribute to his brother, a hero of the Falklands War who served on the ill-fated ship Sir Galahad. I'm delighted that Michael joins us on the show this morning. Good morning, Michael. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Bill. Good morning.
Yes, this is a lovely thing to do to your brother. He passed in 2012, but his story needs to be told, and he really was a war medic hero. But let's start at the beginning, I think, for you, because actually how you ended up both doing the same thing is fascinating. You grew up in Tanzania, that's correct?
Yes, that's right. We were both born and raised in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania. That's in East Africa. And we lived there as teenagers until 1964, when we emigrated to the UK.
Now, that wasn't an emigration out of choice, really, was it? It was a kind of a forced emigration.
Yes, yeah. In those days, it was a British colony until independence in 1961. The then ruling president, Dr. Julius Nyerere, decided to nationalize the whole country. And he wanted all non-blacks to sort of leave the countries. That included Europeans, Asians, and the likes of ourselves. And in 1964, there was a military mutiny. And it was then the turning point, the last straw on the back, really, camel's back. My parents decided enough is enough, and we emigrated.
You then joined the British Royal Army Medical Corps in 1965 and served for over 23 years.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
And what was your specific role?
I was trained, and so was Pierre. We were trained as operating theatre technicians, working throughout military hospitals in the world, serving troops, the families, and civilians as well. But our main speciality was setting up field hospitals. And at a drop of a hat, we could be demobbed and rather mobbed up and taken to hostile areas throughout the world, treating casualties.
Incredible. Under circumstances which must have been horrific at times, I guess.
Absolutely, yeah. But, I mean, neither of us had ever been in a theatre of war until that fateful day in 1982. Where Pierre was mobbed up and taken to the Falklands Islands as part of a field surgical team.
With your field surgical team, I imagine most of the people who are listening to this show, when they think of kind of field hospitals and field surgical teams, they unfortunately will think of the TV show MASH.
Yes.
Which I'm sure, that there maybe was a little comedy in it, but I guess that wasn't a true reflection of the real...
No, Bill, this is serious stuff,
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And you must have operated under conditions which most surgeons would just throw up their hands in horror and say, I'm sorry, I can't do it.
You got it in one, yeah. Unless you have an experienced surgeon, which Pierre fortunately did under the demise of Colonel Jim Ryan, who was an experienced surgeon indeed. And, it's fantastic to work under guys like that, because they wouldn't ask for instrumentation that you would find in a general hospital in the NHS. And anything happens, you got to work on your toes, so to speak.
So your brother, as you say, was called up to go to the Falklands. Was he put straight onto the Galahad then?
No, Bill, no. It was a long, tortuous journey. In fact, they left Southampton docks on the Queen Elizabeth II, a luxury liner.
Yes, I remember.
If you recall, it was commandeered by Margaret Thatcher to take the troops very, very quickly. And the fastest ship going was the QE2 in those days.
Yeah.
And it was converted as a troop carrier.
Well, I remember, this has particular poignance for me, Michael, because at the time of the Falkland Islands, I was presenting a breakfast show on a rather large radio station in the south coast of England, and we were based in Portsmouth.
Yes.
And so it was a very big deal, and we were broadcasting from Portsmouth Dock all the time as the ships were going out to the Falklands. We saw them all leave HMS Uproar. We saw, obviously, most of them come back. Not all of them come back. And I'll never forget going up to our newsroom, as we had then at the radio station, and the girl who was doing the news that morning, we used to have telexes in those days.
Yeah.
And, unbelievably. And the news came down the line on the telex that HMS Sheffield had been hit by an Exocet missile.
Yep.
And the girl who did the news just collapsed on the floor because her husband was on board HMS Sheffield. And that was her first knowledge of the fact that it had been hit by an Exocet.
Well, I'll tell you a little snippet of a story, actually, Bill. I was called up to go to the Cambridge Military Hospital in Aldershot to relieve Pierre. We were both theatre technicians, and unfortunately we never served in the same theatre at the same time. The army would never put the two brothers together. So I was posted to the Cambridge Military Hospital to relieve him so he could go to the Falklands. And on that particular day, we were sitting in the coffee room in the operating theatre watching the BBC newsreel. And there was Sir Galahad ablaze. And we were all saying, poor buggers, you know. And I didn't even know my brother was on the ship.
Oh, dear God.
Can you imagine it?
Oh, I can. It's just... Well, for those who don't know, I mean, it's worth going over the history here of Sir Galahad. I mean, Sir Galahad was what was called the Royal Fleet Auxiliary Vessel.
Correct.
And she sailed from Devonport with Marines on board and went to San Carlos, I believe, firstly.
Correct.
And what people may not remember is that Galahad actually was hit by a 1,000-pound bomb and carried on.
That's right. That's right, yeah.
That's an extraordinary part of the story. The bomb was unexploded. They removed the bomb, and she carried out her supply runs. And
Pierre was shifted from ship to ship. Obviously, the QE2 couldn't go in these small sounds in the Falkland Islands, so they transferred the troops from ship to ship, and that's when he was transferred to the Sir Galahad ship. As you say, rightly, it was an RFA which carried troops. It carried the Welsh and Scots Guard, actually, and the whole element of the field surgical team.
Yes. And that day you talk about so movingly there of seeing on the TV was the 8th of June 1982. It was preparing to unload soldiers from the Welsh Guards, and it was attacked by 3 aircraft simultaneously, each of them loaded with 3 bombs. And it was hit by 2 or 3 of those bombs and set alight, and that's the images that you're talking about.
Absolutely.
I don't think any of us who saw those will ever forget the images.
You can imagine the images, you know, terrific. And this is all recorded in my book, War Medic Hero.
Well, exactly, and the reason it's recorded so accurately is because your brother kept documents and kept letters.
Correct, yes. Yes, all his personal letters to his wife, Nina, at home, which makes amazing reading, really, because it depicts the emotions, you know, the feelings, the conditions of all the troops.
Yeah.
You know, during and after the actually war.
I think it was around 48 soldiers and crew died on board Sir Galahad, and for your brother it must...
You're dead right.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt.
No problem.
48 people were killed. Yeah.
And for your brother, that must have been absolute carnage. I mean, basically, the ship was on fire. The last man off was the captain, but eventually it was over for the ship. But he was a hero because he was dealing in horrendous conditions and trying to fix people who were basically really badly burned.
Correct. Yeah. He found himself, ironically, Bill, as the only medic on board.
Oh.
Because during the disembarkation, all of these mates, all of the field hospital surgeons, etc., were already on the shore when this bomb hit the Sir Galahad, and he found himself just as a sole medic.
Good Lord. Well, he did what he could do. He managed to save himself as well. And then I read the book, and there was one point which actually got very angry when I read your book.
Yes.
And it's over something quite minuscule but really important, that
yes.
he applied to replace his passport, which he'd lost.
God.
He'd lost on Sir Galahad, and the Home Office decided they'd rather revoke his citizenship.
You ain't kidding, Bill. I mean, Pierre was distraught. He actually rang me and spoke to me, and he says, Mike, just be careful. My passport was lost on the Sir Galahad when it was bombed. It's down in the bottom of the sea. And the Home Office wouldn't renew my passport. They were going to kick him out of the country.
Oh, it makes me so angry.
And it took him 3.5 years to get his passport back.
Good Lord.
Yeah.
Beggars belief.
And the actual letter is in my book.
Yes, indeed. And in your book are descriptions which are very accurate and sometimes, difficult to read, but worth people reading to see what people have gone through.
Absolutely. I think politicians should peruse the book.
Yes.
When deciding about going to war.
Absolutely. Well, Pierre sadly died in 2012, 30 years after the Falklands War, but this book is a tribute to him and all the other people who served on board, but particularly to him, who is a war medic hero. That's exactly what he is. And it's a great read, and it's so lovely that you've done it for him. What about yourself these days? What are you up to these days, Mike?
Well, I'm retired now, Bill.
Yep.
I used to work in the NHS as carrying on in my trade as operating theatre technicians. I retire, and I live now with my wife in Hereford. And I run my own gardening business.
Oh, lovely.
So it's totally different.
So you've gone from tending people to tending plants.
Yes.
Well, it's a great book. Thank you so much for coming on and talking about it, Michael. I wish you a very happy retirement with your plants, and I really appreciate your time this morning.
Yeah. Can I just say, people can get it on Amazon.
Yep.
And they can also look me up on my Facebook page.
Fantastic.
For details.
That's Michael Naya, Naya.
Correct.
Michael,
Thank you
a pleasure.
for letting me on your program, Bill.
No problem. My pleasure. All the best.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye now.
TRE